When talking about a guy like Miles Garrett, again, stud potential for him at the NFL level. You have to be careful sometimes not to fall in love with certain spectacular traits that the guy has and overlook maybe somebody else that doesn't quite have some of those spectacular physical traits and characteristics that he exhibits on a consistent basis, but is just so solid and damn good in pretty much everything that he does on the football field that frankly you feel like you're nitpicking if you come up with a weakness. Do you go with the guy with some spectacular ability, or do you prefer the guy that's damn good at pretty much everything that he does every time he steps on the football field? That spectacular stuff to me is a Miles Garrett. The really damn good at pretty much everything he does, and therefore a slight preference to him for me is Jonathan Allen. Now, Jonathan Allen is a guy that surprised me in the fact that he did not declare for the 2016 NFL draft. Because you're talking about a guy playing at Alabama. He was a key cog on a team that had won the national championship. When you had a lot of emphasis on some of the Alabama defensive players, such as Ashawn Robinson and Jerron Reed, to me it was the Jonathan Allen of the world that really always stood out to me. I thought he was the man amongst boys every time he got on the football field, line up for that Alabama defense. I thought he was the man amongst boys on that Alabama defense. I thought he was the stud. And I've been waiting for this moment in time where he would be eligible in this year's draft to grade him and talk about him because I just love this kid. I just absolutely love this kid. And, I expect him to be one of those type of dudes at the NFL level. Now, what does he do well? To me, he does just about everything well. Um, I think his pass rush ability is outstanding. It's not Miles Garrett outstanding, but it is really damn good. And it's impressive because he doesn't have that short area burst quickness and just pure athletic explosiveness and powerful explosiveness that a Miles Garrett does. But his technique, I think, could be argued is even better. His hand usage is outstanding. His rip and swim moves are outstanding. He's an incredible bull rusher. He's a better bull rusher than Miles Garrett is. Shows a good feel for being able to fit himself through small gaps in the offensive line. And for a guy playing outside at 285, 290 pounds, he has an underrated ability to bend the edge. Again, not nearly to the level of a Miles Garrett, but he can bend the edge. And I think he could actually bend the edge some at the NFL level. He's also really, really good against the run. Much better than Miles Garrett in this area. While he's not quite the top end pass rusher in terms of potential as Miles Garrett, he's far superior as a run defender. He can anchor, he can shed blockers consistently, does a great job of holding the edge and maintaining contain. Sometimes he can get a little over aggressive, which can lead to some missed tackles, but again, that's not a huge issue because he typically plays aggressively. He's really good with his pad level and leverage. Again, I referenced his ability to shed blockers. I think he's outstanding in terms of shedding blockers, one of the best defensive players at doing so in this year's draft. The one thing that stood out to me above all else when you watch him on film is his awareness is just top notch. Now, typically when we talk about awareness and football intellect and football instincts, you associate that with middle linebackers and you associate that with free safeties, maybe strong safeties and corners to a much lesser degree. But in particular, up the middle of the defense, you associate that with middle linebackers and free safeties because they tend to be the guys that set and call the defense. They're the ones that make the sight adjustments, the audibles. Jonathan Allen has those type of special football instincts. He seems to always know what play is coming. He always seems to know where the play is headed. He understands his responsibility and where it is. He'll make big plays even while staying disciplined. Always seems to be around the football. Always seems to be around the football. Really great feel for knowing internally with the clock in his head that he's tried to rush the passer. He can't get there. How can I still impact the play? Let me get my hand up in the passing alley. When I watch a defensive player like Jonathan Allen and I see that natural football knowledge, that natural innate football instinct and understanding, it's truly impressive. I'm very big on instincts out of a football player because when we can talk about 40 times and height, weight, length, strength, and all this other crap and agility drills and three cones and shuttles and How do they look in shorts doing damn field drills? At the end of the day, so much of it is about awareness and instincts. And I reference back to a legend, Dick Butkus. People will talk about that he wasn't the greatest athlete, da da da. And some of that is because of the time that he played in the mid to late 60s and early 70s. Some of that is, let's face it, because he was a big white boy. So there's always going to be that assumption that he wasn't a great athlete and he couldn't have hung in today's game. He could have hung in today's game because when you go back and watch those games of yore that Butkus was in, he could get sideline to sideline as quick as Urlacher. And I mean that, probably quicker. Because where Urlacher obviously was a superior athlete, Butkus was no slouch as an athlete himself, no matter what anybody wants to say, especially before the knee started to betray him. But his feel and his instinct and his guts for knowing where the play was going, what was coming, being able to read and anticipate the offensive alignment, the offensive play, he was able to get everywhere he needed every single time. And to me, Jonathan Allen has that similar type of instinct in terms of always knowing where he is, always knowing where he needs to be, always knowing what he needs to do. Some guys have that, some guys don't. You have a lot of great athletes that aren't great football players. Jonathan Allen is an adequate athlete that is an outstanding football player, in large part again because of that intellect, that football IQ, that natural innate awareness and instinct for the position that can come in part from work ethic. And he's a tremendous worker, great work ethic, great leader. But some of that's just natural. Some of that's just God given, so to speak. You just can't create that solely on the practice field. Some guys just have it. And Jonathan Allen has it in great abundance. Plays with a decent motor. I think his effort as a pass rusher is also really, really good. And at times he flashes where he could be literally all over the place and he can make plays out of nowhere. You're like, where the fuck did Jonathan Allen come from? Where did 93 come from? Every once in a while, his effort in downfield pursuit in the running game is a little lacking. Now granted, part of that could have been that he played on such a great and loaded Alabama defense at all three levels that it wasn't incumbent upon him to have to hustle so much down the field. He wasn't required to because there wasn't as big of a threat of if he didn't get there, there was going to be a big, huge play. For the NFL level, I'd like to see him play a little bit harder in that area to match all the other things that he does so well. Now, when it comes to Jonathan Allen, I think a lot of people agree that he's a top flight prospect in this draft. And as you could tell with how effusive in the praise I am for him, that I would agree. In fact, I've got him graded higher than Myles Garrett, which for those of you that know me and follow me, this is probably not a new or stunning development. You knew this was coming. It's not by a ton, but I do have him more highly graded than Garrett. Even though Garrett, again, is more spectacular in certain areas, I think Jonathan Allen, as a total complete package as a football player, is vastly overall superior. The one concern I have, though, is that even though he's played every game the past 3 years, he comes from an Alabama program that is known to play more games than anybody else because they're always in the national championship picture, it seems like. But also knowing with Nick Saban, a lot of these Alabama players, you have the guys like the Julio Joneses of the world and Landon Collins of the world and some other guys that really panned out and really, really were big deals in the NFL. But you have so many other notable busts on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. You worry about the fact that Nick Saban beats the hell out of these dudes to get them to play at a national championship level in college. And when you get to the NFL, their bodies start to break down and they start to lose a little bit of that love of football. But for me, he's a consistent game in, game out performer. So I don't see why that would change at the NFL level. But he does have moderate arthritis in both of his shoulders. There's going to be some concerns about the surgeries that he's had on both of his shoulders. Again, hasn't caused him to miss any game action, but when you go back to the combine, you're talking about a guy that only put up 21 reps. And when you look at him, even when you look at my grade for his strength does not match the strength that he exhibited in the bench press because he plays like a dude that bench presses 225 pounds 35 or 40 times. He plays that big and that strong. But there are going to be concerns about his ability to stay strong with moderate arthritis in both shoulders is going to be something that impacts his long-term ability to be productive at a high level at the NFL level, especially when talking about taking this guy with a top 3, top 5, top 10 pick. It's a serious question. Again, to me, great leader, incredible work ethic. Even coming off of his junior year, a guy who I thought was a first round pick then, a top talent coming into that 2016 draft class if he would have declared. He worked, and I felt like he got even better in 2016. He's clean off the field. Just even the concerns. I do wonder if he's going to drop some in the NFL draft because teams are going to be concerned about the shoulder. Teams are also going to be concerned about the fact that he's 285 pounds. He ran a 5.0 flat in the 40 at the combine. Is he best suited being a 4-3 base end? Is he best suited being a 3-4 defensive end? Is he best suited to be a 4-3 3 technique defensive tackle, particularly in a cover 2 scheme? So he might get a bit of a tweener label, which, to me, with a guy like Jonathan Allen, you can take that tweener label and pound it up your ass. Because at the end of the day, and I need to stop saying that phrase too, apparently, when all is said and done, the dude is an absolute stud. If you're any type of organization or any type of coaching staff at all worth your weight in anything, you take a Jonathan Allen and you figure out where the hell to play him. So where does he ultimately get drafted is going to be the question. He's not going to go number 1. I don't think he'll go number 2. I think the beginning of his draft range starts number 3 at Chicago. And look, at the end of I got to stop saying that. When it comes time for the Bears to pick, if they ended up taking Jonathan Allen, I would be really incredibly happy. Because, granted, leave it to the Chicago Bears, the dumb dicks that they are, in a year that they actually got a high enough pick to be able to entertain the thought of taking a franchise quarterback, they would do it in the year that there isn't a clear-cut franchise quarterback there. Because that's what the Chicago Bears do. But man, getting a guy like Jonathan Allen, if they did that, I would be doing backflips. Because I think this dude is a stud. He's a natural fit in their 3-4 defense. If you want to talk about how much would he really play in that scheme, if he doesn't play the majority of the snaps, then Vic Fangio and John Fox are fucking idiots. It's that simple. After that, Jacksonville could want him at 4. Tennessee could want him to play on the defensive line with Jarrell Casey at pick 5. The Jets, you would think, wouldn't take him, but Lord only knows it's the Jets. The Chargers could take him at number 7 and want to team him up with Bosa. Could you imagine a defensive line with Jonathan Allen maybe on the inside or even at the other end position? Or probably playing inside for them and then Joey Bosa. Oh my goodness in heaven. Carolina, I think, would love to get their greasy, grimy, grubby grips on him at number 8. Cincinnati would probably love the thought of getting him at number 9. They'd probably play him all over the place. So somewhere in there. If he dropped down to 7, 8, 9 range, it's because teams had concern about the shoulder. If he drops any more than that, then teams are really fucking stupid. And it's just that simple. My final grade for Jonathan Allen is a 94.0. So as you can see, graded 1 point higher than Myles Garrett. Again, I would rather have the guy that I think is really good at pretty much everything he does as opposed to the guy who's spectacular in some areas and lacking in some. In terms of an NFL comparison, you probably hear some for J.J. Watt and so on and so forth. Some of that fits, but he reminds me of a Richard Seymour type of guy. And when you think about Richard Seymour, like everybody will love to talk about the impact that Belichick and Tom Brady had on the Patriots and what they've meant to the Patriots and everything else. And so much of that is valid. But I really think as an organization, it was starting with that 2001 draft when they drafted Richard Seymour, that defense took shape under Belichick. And he was that franchise player, you'd argue, on defense for many years. He was the building block that they built the rest of that great Belichick defense of the Patriots in the early and mid-2000s around. That's what I envision a Jonathan Allen type of guy being that type of guy that is a building block for a defense, a guy that makes multiple Pro Bowls, maybe is all-pro, and someday you talk about how he was this close to being a Hall of Famer, or maybe you could argue someday was a Hall of Famer. I don't know if Richard Seymour is a Hall of Famer, but he's definitely one of those guys that I don't think you can undersell his importance in the history of the New England Patriots organization, especially as they turn from being an organization that was mediocre to being arguably the best operation in the National Football League. To me, Jonathan Allen is a stud. If the Bears take him at 3, I'm tickled. If he goes much lower than that in the draft, teams are stupid, period. But he's not my number 1 rated defensive lineman, my number 1 rated player in this draft class.